art and sport mirror each other. They require discipline, imagination, and the drive to create something truly extraordinary. And today, they've never been closer, which is why I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome you all to our very first Sports Cross Art Day here at Art Basel Conversations. My name is Colleen Milliard. I'm Art Basel Executive Editor, and I will be your host today as we hear from luminaries from across the fields talking about why this convergence between art and sport is happening right now and what it means for culture at large. Today, we're going to hear from Elliot Perry, an incredible former NBA star and now an inspiring collector. We'll hear from Ali Riley, an international soccer player and art muse. We'll hear from Paul Pfeiffer, who is an incredible artist and a sports fanatic. Together, they'll consider why collecting, collaboration, representation really can change what we think about success and what it means on and off the field. But I cannot think of a better way to start than we are speakers assembled on stage today. It's a huge honor for us to welcome the twice Super Bowl champion, Malcolm Jenkins. Malcolm is not just an athlete, he's also a collector and an entrepreneur, and a friend of the artist Tavares Strachan, who played a fundamental role on your art journey, as you will explain to our moderator, the curator, Kimberly Drew. So, before I hand over the floor, I just wanted to say a round thank you to all our collaborators here in Miami and way beyond who worked very hard to make today possible. I want to thank the Art Basel team, and in particular Simon Sixou for the great work that's gone into this. And above all, I want to thank our speakers, who I'm sure will make of this sports and art first day at Art Basel a true milestone for the Conversations program. So now please join me in welcoming Malcolm, Tavares, and Kimberly. Thank you.
Thank you. This is fab. I'm so excited. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you all for waking up and being here with us. My name is Kimberly Drew, as you heard. Personally, every talk that I begin, I want for people to feel like they're arriving in space. And so if you'll follow me, I want to invite everyone to just take a deep breath together. We've taken walks, we've taken Ubers that take 20 minutes to arrive, we've gone into the wrong entrance and had to ask for instructions. So if it feels available to you, I ask everyone to just close your eyes. And then we're gonna take a big breath in. And then let it out, let it out, let it out. Thank you for being here. Thank you for arriving with us. Some of the key tenets of today's conversation, of course, are gonna be about excellence, because I sit here with two excellent practitioners in their respective fields. This is gonna be a conversation, of course, about friendship and the art world today. And I'm excited. We have a really exciting pre-call. And so I look forward to hearing from you both and just radiating the energy together. So I want to start first with friendship. And I'd love for each, there's a noise going on back there. Is it possible? Thank you. I'd like to, start with the start. What was the meet cute? When did the bromance begin? Fill us in, take us there, paint the scene.
Yeah, it started with a studio visit. Right after I retired, I had mentioned to some of my financial advisors that, hey, I wanted to start collecting art seriously. And so they had put together a studio visit. I didn't know who Tavares was. I almost said no, but I went, and his work, felt like he was like in my head. I'm like, if I was an artist, this is what I would try to make. It's like I'm seeing like history, sports and game theory, all kind of things. I'm like, so I started asking questions immediately. And he said, if you want to be serious about being a collector, you should go to the Venice Biennale. I'm like, what is that? He's like, it's the Olympics of sports. You should go. I'm like, okay, cool, I'll go. Yeah, it's in 2 weeks. Another time I almost said no, but I said yes to that, and it just really blew my mind. He brought me into kind of his world. broke bread, and I got to really get immersed in this art space, and it really opened my mind up as a collector, just seeing what was out there and then what was possible. And we've just built that friendship kind of from there, where I'm picking his brain, and somehow he's asking me about what quarterbacks are thinking about, before the snap. But it's been an awesome journey.
My relationship with Malcolm began way before we met, because his Eagles beat my Patriots.
We're Patriots. How did
yeah.
you end up a Patriots fan?
Yeah.
He's only telling you he's a Patriots fan because
How
they're
the
good
heck
right
do
now.
you become a Patriots fan by choice?
I know. I went to school in New England.
Okay.
So, and I'm from the Bahamas, so I didn't know any better. Is that a good?
We'll allow it.
Is that good? Anyway, this guy was a menace, and I think that what intrigued I think both of us was that we were so interested in what each other's worlds were like, but there were all these barriers in between, and so we just started asking each other about. I remember us like having a strange time even knowing how to interact with each other. Like, are we allowed to talk to each other without a third party, or like what do we need to be doing? And so we just cut right to the chase, and here we are.
Amazing. I feel that there's a lot of ways in which we find ourselves being collegial in the world. I think that there's a way, especially within, I can only speak for the art world, there is a particular metric of respectability. And I wonder for each of you, in this blossoming friendship, there's a lot of vulnerability that you're meeting each other with. There's things that you know and don't know, because it's not a pitch. You're on the field, right? Okay, so you are not on the field, but we're in, this other field, right? And so I'm curious if you both could speak a bit about the ways in which you hold each other accountable in moments of vulnerability around what you know and don't know. How do you make room for each other to teach each other and to have moments in which you can truly learn?
I know for me, it started with being humble enough just to ask questions, like to be curious enough to ask questions and know that he has something to offer. And I think especially as trying to be a collector, trying to understand a new space, it's like, I know what it's like to be a rookie. Right. You got to ask questions, and there's no better person than to ask than somebody who's doing it at the highest level. And so there have been, times where I'm telling him about what I'm thinking about my collection and where I want to go, and he's able to tell me like that's not how you should. If you want to do something this big, you want to grow something that's worth growing, you shouldn't think about it like that. And here's why. That stuff to me as a young collector, I've been seriously collecting for maybe 3 years, and to see other collectors that have been in it for maybe 10 plus and are still trying to figure it out. And you realize that, to Tavares' point, the only thing blocking it is just having conversation and having relationship. And so being able to do that in settings that are outside of the fairs, the studio, we go to dinner, and really making space for that, I think gave, at least for me, the opportunity to ask questions, to pick his brain and let him know even what I was trying to do to get some feedback on it.
Yeah, I had a classmate once who told me that you can't fake caring, and I think there's like a piece of.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Whomever's thing is making. Sorry.
Is outside.
It's outside. Oh, how bizarre. Sorry. Okay.
No, it was for me. I think my approach with Malcolm was about respect. I think within that respect there is vulnerability. Because I'm not an athlete, obviously, but I think what's beautiful about that is that we're not trying to. He's not trying to be an artist. I'm not trying to be an athlete, and I think there's a beautiful poetry and safety in that. But there's also just like a pure, like there's an elevated level of respect, just because I can see the work that Malcolm's put into everything that he's done. And I think that allows me to be more vulnerable about things that I don't know.
Oh, I love that. I feel like there's there's a way in which we all have our relative intelligences. I think there's a lot of ways in which the art world is considered impenetrable. There are ways in which the art world kind of infrastructurally builds that kind of opacity. But to your point about, like a respect for labor is just something that we can all understand. There are humans who placed all these chairs here, there's sound techs, there's so many hands that go into making something like this possible. And at the end of the day, it really is about care, respect, and an awareness of where you are. So I am not a football person. I'm a basketball person, I'm a WNBA person. That was the fire through which I was raised. And I was just recently with my family, which is a football family. We were all around the table eating soul food, and I asked my uncle about Malcolm because I was like, okay, so who is this? Who is this to you? As he's a Steelers fan, sorry. But I was like, who is this person to you? And he's like, Google him. And I was like, no. I need to understand intimately how the world sees this person who was just inducted into the Hall of Fame. And my Uncle Michael said that you are a special player because from rookie to vet, you are one of the most consistent players. And I think that that's something to admire between the both of you because it is about consistent labor. It is about continuing to show up. And so I wonder if you could talk a bit about, especially from Malcolm's position, how you have found yourself doing that labor. What has that journey been like? Because it is, it's not easy being a rookie in the arts.
No, I think the good thing is the consistency usually comes from a solid process. And that's one of the things I understand a lot is like, no matter the field I'm in, process is where you kind of see the details, and that's where I can respect an artist, especially when I go to their studio, when you see the process, the material, the labor that goes into it. And so that hasn't really been hard for me to navigate. The art world is actually very similar to the sports world, where the artist is essentially the athlete that has an agent, has reps, has this whole ecosystem that builds them up from a very young age all the way until their pro career. But athletes usually are able to break those barriers and communicate with each other with a language that they both understand. So I can call a veteran who I don't know, who I'm trying to learn from, and ask a question. That's very natural for athletes to do. And so I've found that practice to be how I approach the art world. I usually collect artists that I know and I've visited with, spent time with, built a relationship with, and I'm learning things from them. And surprisingly, they are very, very interested in the sports space, whether it's the high performance mindset or it's just wealth management, how you think about, giving back to the community. So there's this really, there's a lot to offer, I think, between those two that make it very natural and not as kind of like distant as we would imagine.
I think there's also a piece of this that has to do with time, like the lifespan of an athlete. Right, like an athlete's retiring, mid to late 30s, roughly.
No, I had a long career.
Right.
So yeah, I played 13 seasons. The average is 3.
Right. So the point that I'm making is that there is a mind-body discipline that goes into having longevity, right? That's really important to think about, especially from the perspective of an artist, right? Because it's both form and content. There's idea and there's execution, and I think that balance, I think, is where longevity comes from. So I think watching your career makes me think about that. Or any athlete who's had a long career, you think about what goes into lasting that long, right? Because it's not normal to last long.
And even consistency, like one of the things I've found really, it's changed the way I try to even approach my thought, because the career of an athlete is so short, you usually don't think long term. And so when I think about an artist like Tavares, who continues to level up every single time he presents something, and I'll ask him about it, and it's like, oh, you go to a studio and you realize he's been working on these things for decades, right? And so to have a vision that's that far out, to know where you are, to have a daily process, a daily labor, but you see way far in ahead and planting seeds. That's something that I'm learning how to do now, even being in the art space. Even as a collector, it's less about what's here today, but what is this going to mean down the road as a collection. And so it's, like I said, I'm learning so much from this space that I came in for the art and it was fun and the relationships, but I found so much more enrichment just in education in so many different areas just by engaging.
It's interesting, and I'm jaded, so I have to start with that. It's really interesting the ways in which at least the art world can feel very familial. But it's also like that weird uncle who like you want to disinvite sometimes. And Tavares, I wonder if you could talk about what teamwork looks like in your practice, because we don't have the same kind of infrastructure as sport where you can count on your teammate. You can count on the kicker to kick the thing in the thing. There's a lot of ways in which you really have to trust fall in terms of which galleries you're working with, who becomes your studio manager, who on the ground is working on production. And so I wonder for yourself, especially at the era and career in which you are in, how you build your team.
I think that's a great question. I think team is everything. Particularly because I think the parallel between art and sport is that it is the thing that most parents discourage children from, going in that direction. And I think that's what's fascinating about athletes and artists is your existence is going against the grain, right? You're not supposed to be like how many people like get drafted into the NFL per year? Not a lot.
Maybe like 700,
Right.
750.
And how many of those make it? You said
Not many.
right.
Yeah.
So I mean, your family, when you say, hey, I think I'm pretty good at painting, and you start painting, and everyone's shaking their head like this, like
Your Caribbean family in
yeah,
particular.
they're like, nah. What do you think this is? And so I think one develops a thick skin as a result of having to prove yourself over and over again, and I'm sure that's the case on the court or on the field. And I think you start to develop this idea that the relationships you have are going to be the most significant relationships because they have to somehow borrow this ethos from you, right? They have to somehow take on this energy from you that we're going to do the thing regardless of what everyone else is saying. And there's very few people in the world who are actually confident enough to do something that, very few people are doing, right? And I think the group of people that surround an artist, any artist, or any creative person or any athlete has to have that ethos that we're gonna somehow find a way, regardless of what the thing looks like at the moment.
There is a way in which there's art and sport are such faith-based practices. You bet on your team, you bet on an artist, you bet on yourself. I wonder if we could talk a bit about the navigation of some of those systems. We had a really integrated dialogue during our pre-call about the difference between a collector and a patron. And I wonder if you guys could talk a little bit about, and maybe Tavares first, just for a historical perspective. Because I think that that's something that's interesting in a zone such as this one, at a commercial fair where you're offered things or you buy things or it's who you know and what your last name is. And talk to me about the different, in your mind anyway. I think everybody has their own respective definitions of the two.
Yeah, as a student of art, I think you think a lot about the relationship between creativity and power. Over time and continuum, there's always been a relationship between any creative project and resource capital. From the pyramids in Giza to, the Eiffel Tower to the Brooklyn Bridge to, so many beautiful, the Sistine Chapel, there's this relationship between creativity and power. So I think that's one of the first pieces of it for me, and I think the idea that these relationships do exist between creativity and power there is a link between that and patronage. Like the Sistine Chapel wouldn't exist. It couldn't exist without that relationship, those relationships that are critically important. In the context of now, on our call at least, one of the things that it reminded me of was a young artist called me up and was like struggling because the work, for whatever reason, the work was not selling. And anyone who came up when I was coming up, like not selling work was normal. Like it's just what it was. And you just found a way to be an artist without having to sell work. And I think those ways that one survives those moments is through those relationships that one has with the community, the patron. And Malcolm and I talk about this all the time. Once you have a relationship with someone, your interaction with them becomes less transactional. Like it can't really be transactional. If we're sitting down having a meal constantly, then you eradicate this notion of the transaction. And I think in this day and age that's so fast-paced and so much predicated on technology, it's really nice to have relationships with people that go beyond the thing.
Yeah, I think as a new person in the space, when you talk about like trust, I think there's a lot of trust falls. But I think that's navigating any type of business where there is transaction. The basis of a transaction is trust. And so I found it very similar to navigating as an athlete who wants to have other interests outside of sports. You want to get into business. Everybody knows you have, money. Everybody wants to offer you their business plan or whatever. Somebody's got a record label they want to start, whatever it is, right? You get all the wildest requests. So being in an environment like this is not really new. It's like when you understand what to look for, and the majority of that is in relationships, and being able to be patient enough to build those relationships.
Also, more bluntly, like we're coming from similar communities. Yeah. And I think the idea that we're not more in communication with each other is absurd, right? Yeah. Like we're literally sharing all this language prior to our professions, and then we become practitioners, and then we just forget how to talk to each other because all of this artifice is in between. And I think a part of the reason why, I think that's the connective tissue for us, was like, we both looked at each other and was like, why are we not, we have so much in common, why are we just not hanging out?
Yeah. And the answer really is, like you said, it was just because the language or framework is usually transactional. And so I've been really excited about like, okay, how does this I'm like, one, his work is starting to get out of my budget.
Been
out of my budget.
Which, slay.
Hey, so our relationship has to even exist outside of transaction, which has been really good for me though, because it's opened my eyes to like how to be a friend, a patron, artist, how to be effective and what things matter, outside of the capital I bring to the situation. And that is refreshing because that gives me everything to look for when I'm dealing with other folks. Like only people who align and think in the way I do are those I'm going to trust fall with. Yeah. And I think, that's been a help.
So I would say also that for Malcolm, I think the reason why I think he, is at a kind of creative frequency is because I think one of the things that every artist does on a daily basis is they jump out the window, like metaphorically, right? Like, in order to be I think a respectable practitioner, I think you have to give it all up every now and then, right? You have to forget the things that got you where you were and start a new set of things that may not work, right? And I think the example of that for Malcolm was at the height of his career. Malcolm brilliantly decided to kneel during the national anthem. And I think, right? And I think to be able to have so much success and to be able to put that success on the chopping block for something that you believe in, which is, again, I think the fundamental definition of what it is to be an artist, is to have this thing that you know so well and are so comfortable with, and be willing to take that and say, well, what about another thing? And I think that's deeply brave, right? I think, and I think that bravery is what I think athletes and artists share. It's like you just got to be brave. So thank you for that, by the way.
It's 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 such a time of cowardice. You know, I started by saying I was jaded because I feel like there's this way in which, especially the last few years, without getting too political, we've watched so many people fold. We've watched so many people move, succeed, thrive with little to no integrity and run almost exclusively on audacity. And I wonder if we could talk about how we hypothesize and construct ourselves towards integrity. Because I think that, especially as you were saying, these spaces are deeply transactional. They can be soul-sucking, they can be blah, blah, blah. But how, in your respective practices, do you maintain the curiosity, hypothesis, experimentation? Because there's ways in which the game can also be very formulaic. There are certain things that will then beget certain outcomes. How do you keep it spicy?
Yeah, I think there's a proximity that success has to time and longevity, right? I think they are kind of in concert with each other, and I think we all have to decide what kinds of players we are. Are we finite players or are we infinite players? Are we playing just to win now or are we playing to play again? And I think once we work that out, you start to see the correlation between someone who has a 3-year career that's like maybe amazing for a year and then they just, or someone who has a 15-year career and they're like really steady for that 15-year period. And I think that is about integrity. But it also is about self belief. It's about just believing in one's ability to do the thing. And I think, for me, that's like, that longevity piece is a huge piece of this. Because you could be hugely successful for a year or two, but to be 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years as an artist doing your thing is not exactly easy to do, and it's why not everyone can do it.
I mean, to piggyback off that, so one of the things that it kind of changed my entire perspective too from one of our visits, and he just quoted it, was from this book called Finite and Infinite Games. And as an athlete, you always think about the end of the game is the goal, right? To win is kind of the goal. It's a very limited thinking, especially when, to your point, when you start looking at, okay, well, who's winning? And it's people who you might not want to follow. And so shifting that perspective to, like, what is the long game here? Like, what is this going to mean forever? Once this person rises, falls, and this comes back around, what does that look like? And I think we're even seeing that in the art space now, where Black and brown artists who've been ignored for centuries are all of a sudden getting their day, right? And who's participating in that?
And who's also giving it? The reparations of it all is great. Sorry.
But I think knowing all of that is like, that takes that takes long-term vision, that takes patience, that takes understanding that, not to get too deep into football, but like, okay, there's going to be a next play, there's going to be a next drive, and being strategic about building those relationships. I think those are the things that last. There's always going to be new players, new things that are happening. I don't think those last, and I think when you start to not be able to tell the difference between what is legitimate and not, and then I think it's time to work on your eyes. I think that's what this fair is for, to be able to see a ton of things, understand what's out there, and you get a better feel for knowing what's real and what is not.
I have a question for both of you two about losing. Like, what's the value of losing?
I think losing oftentimes is more valuable than winning. I learned a ton more in losses than wins. I learned what didn't work. I learned what worked. I learned, why not, and was able to apply it. Usually when you win, especially if you win consistently, you tend to think the thing is not broken, and so you don't fix it, or you don't pay attention to it, and you don't pay attention to how the game around you is now changing to adapt to you. And so when you think constantly about, okay, it's not really about the end goal. There's no finish line to this. It's just about being consistent and taking it where I can go, being creative and being curious. then all of a sudden you're always ahead of the game. It never catches up to you. Losses all of a sudden empower you because you just learned something you didn't know. And so, yeah, that's really been my relationship with losing is like I'll probably lose before I win, and that's a good thing. So once I get that out the way, we can go up from here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm like, okay, a game loss is like a clear thing. But I'm like, for me, I'm like, what does losing look like? Because I have no romantic relationship with failure. Like, I know some people are like, we talk about failure and rest is resistance, and I'm not that. What does losing mean? I feel like there is a way in which, and it comes down to friendship too. Like, I think some of the greatest losses that I've experienced are friends in this industry. And trying to actively go through a process of grieving in what is a very small network. And so for myself, I think what I'm trying not to lose is my kind of centrifugal force. What I'm trying not to lose is space in a room. Because you know that thing when you like see someone who's an op and then you like move differently and you don't want to make like I'm over that. I'm trying not to lose space in rooms. So it's not so much about like the game of it. Like I believe a lot in choreography. I believe a lot in play.
See, that's interesting because my equation for success somehow there's no winning and losing in success, right?
No.
It somehow exists outside of success exists outside of winning and losing. I think, for me, I think the going back to process, but the idea that one is one gets to try to do the thing. One has the privilege to be in the position to try to do the thing. Is success to me is like, or if you can put yourself in the position to do the thing, then that's how I think about success. So I'm with you. I don't want to have a chat about failure. Who cares, right? It's just one element of the thing. It's just you get to do the thing is the critical piece.
No, I think that's so interesting. And you were talking about the conversation you'd had with another artist about sales or no sales. And we kind of got into it because I'm like such a capitalist. And I was like, everybody wants to sell. But then, or make money, I should say, not necessarily sell, because we place things. But as well as like, yeah, being able to stay within the opportunity to create and being able to stay within the opportunity to have divination and find yourself with new ideas, new opportunities, in and of itself is like actually truly what's priceless. And so I wonder, because we're also like somehow almost done, if you could talk about some of the things right now that you're trying. What are some of the games in which you're finding yourselves playing right now?
Right now, for me as a retired player, I hate that word retired because I work more now. As a former athlete, who's actually one of my responsibilities now is helping other NFL guys transition out of sports into whatever it is they want to do next. I found that this has been a great place for me, even in my transition of like learning about business, about long-term thinking, just about how reworking yourself and going through your own kind of archives of memories and how to transform that into something that means something beyond the field. I'm trying to cultivate that more. I see it. Not many people understand it when I talk about it. But last year, and Tavares was a part of it, we had the game of art, which I brought, similar to what he did for me at the Venice Biennale, I did for a few artists and brought them to the Super Bowl. Had a whole week where we took them around to all the different events. They got to see my world and how that works for an athlete, and we went to the game. So we'll do that again in San Fran this year. And the whole point is to start to build these spaces where athletes, artists, and collectors all commingle. We have relationships, we break bread, and start to break down some of these barriers, share some of the knowledge that is necessary at an opportune time where we can actually get some stuff done. So yeah, I think if anybody's interested, it will be in San Fran this year. I think one of these slides is a QR code. Yeah, you can sign up to get information. But Tavares will be there this year again. And this year we got Bisa Butler, Derek Adams, Hank Willis Thomas, and a few other artists that'll be joining us and participating. So be awesome time. But yes, that's one of the games I'm flipping right now.
And since we're out of time, I will just say that Malcolm and I are taking a leap. We're about to launch a podcast together. It's called the Infinite Games, and so look out for it.
I love that. Hard launch.
It's happening.
Excuse me, I feel like I'm a part of something now. Thank you all so much for your time and attention. Thank you both so very much for being with us today. I feel like I learned a lot. We're over time, so that's all. But thank you.